Hey there and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be delving into a question I get asked a lot. What actually causes sensory processing disorder? Now the truth is we don't know everything just yet, but what we do know is really helpful. Let's break it down in a way that's easy to understand while still including the research and the facts behind it. Firstly, what is SPD? Sensory processing disorder is a condition where the brain struggles to make sense of the information coming in from your senses, like touch, sound, movement, and even how your body feels on the inside. For someone with SPD, things that feel normal to others, like background noise, clothing tags, or bright lights, can feel overwhelming, irritating, and even painful. It's not just being sensitive. It's a real neurological difference in how the brain and the body communicate. So what causes it? Firstly, brain wiring differences. Researchers believe that SPD is related to how the brain is wired. One study found that boys with SPD had lower white brain matter connectivity, especially in the part of the brain called the parietal region. White brain matter works like a highway in the brain, connecting regions that send and receive signals. It's how messages travel between different areas. If those highways aren't working well, it can slow down or scramble the way the brain processes sensory information. People with SPD also show different physical responses to sensory input, like changes in skin conductance, that's how much you sweat, or different brainwave patterns compared to those without SPD. So in short, their nervous systems react differently to the world around them. Secondly, genetics. There's strong evidence that SPD can run in families. If a parent or sibling has sensory differences, it's more likely that others in the family will too. Researchers are looking at specific genes that might affect how the brain takes in and organizes sensory input. Thirdly, prenatal or birth factors. Things that happen before, during, or right after birth can raise the risk of SPD. This includes low birth weight, so under 2.2 kilograms or about 5 pounds, being born early, before 32 to 36 weeks. One study found that 46% of babies born before 32 weeks showed signs of SPD later on. Another contributing factor can be maternal stress or illness during pregnancy, substance exposure during pregnancy, for example, medications, alcohol or drugs, and lastly, emergency surgeries or traumatic births. These experiences can affect brain development and make it harder for the nervous system to process the world smoothly later in life. Fourthly, environmental factors can play a role, especially during early development. Growing up around a lot of chemicals or pollution, or living in an environment that's either too overstimulating or too understimulating during key developmental stages. Both too much and too little sensory input can affect how the brain learns and responds to the world. SPD often shows up alongside other diagnoses. Here's how they are connected. With regards to autism spectrum disorder or ASD, researchers found that 77% to 95% of autistic adults experience sensory processing challenges. In fact, sensory differences are now part of the official autism diagnosis in the DSM-5, which is a diagnostic manual used by clinicians. With regards to ADHD, a large number of people with ADHD also deal with sensory processing disorder. A 2017 research review found that unusual sensory reactions are a core feature of adult ADHD, not just a side effect. SPD is also linked to other mental health conditions. People with SPD often report struggles like anxiety, depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia spectrum disorders. A large review called a meta-analysis found that people with mental health conditions often have more sensory sensitivity, are more sensory avoiding, less sensory seeking, in other words, it's hard to find joy in certain sensations, and have more difficulty noticing and responding to sensory input. In some cases, researchers think sensory challenges may contribute to mental health issues or even be a part of what causes or worsens them. With regards to a diagnosis of anxiety or stress, people with SPD often feel anxious because their environment feels unpredictable or too intense. But anxiety can also make sensory sensitivity worse. It's like turning up the volume on everything around you. This can create a feedback loop where anxiety triggers sensory overwhelm, and sensory overwhelm triggers more anxiety. One study even found that people with high sensory sensitivity had higher cortisol levels in their hair. Cortisol is a stress hormone. That means their bodies are literally holding more stress over time. And lastly, SPD can also happen alongside other neurodevelopmental conditions, like learning disabilities or developmental coordination disorder, which is a condition that affects physical coordination and motor skills. It's important to note that even though SPD is well researched, it's not officially recognized as its own standalone diagnosis in medical manuals, such as the DSM-5 or ICD-11. Instead, it's usually seen as a feature of other conditions. This can sometimes make it harder to get a diagnosis or support, but that doesn't make your experience any less valid. So to recap, SPD is likely caused by a mix of genetic, brain-based, environmental, and developmental factors, and it often shows up alongside other conditions like autism, ADHD, and anxiety. But no matter what the cause, what's most important is understanding your sensory needs, building strategies that work for you, and getting the support you deserve. If you're ready to take the next step in managing sensory overwhelm, I'd love to support you. You can check out my one-on-one coaching and my online course called Prevent Overstimulation, Reduce Anxiety and Combat Overwhelm. Both are available now on my website, melanielambert.com. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.